folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Gersh, and this week we're doing another movie review. This is Damien, Omen 2. Released in 1978, directed by Don Taylor. Starring William Holden, Jonathan Scott Taylor, Lee Grant, and Lance Hendrickson in an early role. Yeah, I think that's the first film I've ever seen him in. So yeah, Damien, Omen 2, definitely a film that you really don't hear talked about very much. Probably because the original is such a classic, you know. It's very big shoes to fill. But I think this film does a fantastic job, and I think more people should check it out, should talk about it, you know. Another thing is we don't really get any of the returning cast members from the original, so some people might consider that a hindrance. But we got a great cast here, you know, and they all do a fantastic job, you know. We do get one returning cast member in the film, and that's the guy who plays the archaeologist Carl Bugenhagen. So we see him at the beginning. He's off in Israel. And he's talking to one of his colleagues, you know, about the coming of the Antichrist and Damien Thorn. And he tries to get him to join him on his quest to kill Damien, you know. As you know, in the original film, he's the guy that gave Robert Thorne, played by Gregory Peck in the original, the daggers to kill Damien. So he's trying to tell this guy about it. And to convince him, he takes him to the museum where they're showing this big, huge, ancient mural, this huge painting of the Antichrist. And of course it looks exactly like Damien Thorne. And then the guy sees him and he's like, oh my god, it's him. So he decides to join him, you know. And as soon as he says that, the building starts crumbling around them, you know. It blocks their exit on one side. And then they go to walk on the other side. The rubble pours down and they can't leave. The roof caves in on them. Next thing you know, they're buried alive. And that's kind of a running theme throughout this film, which I'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, then 7 or 8 years later, we meet up with Damien once again. Now he's a teenager, and he's off in military school, military academy. And the leader of his squadron is Sergeant Neff, played by Lance Hendrickson. So one thing about Damien in this film is he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what he's meant to be, his destiny, you know. He just knows that he has special powers, but he doesn't know what it's about, you know. He thinks he's probably a psychic or something, he doesn't know. So Sergeant Neff starts to tell him, you know, starts to let him know, he gives him the Bible, and you know, read about who you are and what your destiny is. So Damien starts reading the Bible, and he reads the passage about the coming of the Antichrist. And his number is 666. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast. And then he looks in the mirror, and he sees that he has the 666 in his head. So now he knows. And he starts to run with it. And one thing is Damien is living with Richard Thorne, who's played by William Holden in the film. And he's the brother of Robert, played by Gregory Peck in the original. And his wife Anne Thorne, played by Lee Grant. So yeah, they've taken Damien into their house and they treat him as their own son, you know. They love him, they care about him. And they're there with their son, Mark, who is Damien's cousin. And Mark is also going to the military academy with Damien, and they're good buddies, they're having a great time together. And things start to get a little weird, though, when people keep continuing to warn Richard about Damien, you know. When you do that, things don't go well for you in this film. You know? So we start with the aunt, who is Richard's mother. She doesn't like Damien. She thinks he's a bad influence on Mark. So she tries to tell Richard, you know, you gotta do something about him. You gotta get him out of here. And she threatens to cut him out of her will. And she owns part of the Thorn Industries as well, which Richard runs. So yeah, she threatens to cut him out and take her share and get out of there, you know. And as soon as she does that, she goes off to her room to go to sleep, and she's visited by the Crow. And as you know, in the original film, Damien used different animals to do his bidding, you know, to carry on his work and make things look like an accident. Make it look like it's just natural causes. So as soon as she sees the Crow, she has a heart attack and drops dead on the ground. And yeah, that's kind of the running theme throughout this film. Another funny scene is when this bully kid starts picking on Damien, you know, and starts ragging on his father. And Damien gets pissed off. He's like, don't you ever mention my father again. And then when the kid's like, starts getting flipped with him, Damien just gives him the look of death, and he starts like freaking out, like the kid's like what's wrong with you, man? Obviously Damien's doing something to him, putting something in his mind that's scaring the living crap out of him, and he like freaks out, you know. And it's like, oh, Damien using a little vulgar display of power there, you know. Usually he doesn't really show it that up front, but you know, he's just a kid and he doesn't really know who he is quite yet, the depth of his power, so you gotta be a little more yeah. And then the sergeant was like, what are you doing, you showing off, you know? And then this teacher starts messing with him too. He kind of giggles in class, and then the teacher calls him out. He's like, oh, you think this is funny, huh? Well, tell me about Napoleon, you know, when was he born? When was the Battle of Waterloo? When did Lincoln die? When did all this? He's tries asking him, drilling him all these questions about history, and Damien knows instantly every single answer because dude's the son of the devil. He knows everything. So he just shows off, and he goes off for like a half an hour just answering every single question the teacher has, and the guy starts getting nervous and he starts running out of questions. That's a great scene. I love it. It's hilarious. But yeah, anyone in this film who tries to warn Richard about Damien or has an issue with Damien or just plain doesn't like him, things do not go well for them, you know? And they die in horrible, horrendous ways, you know? And it's almost to the point where this film feels almost like a supernatural slasher film, you know, because pretty high body count, you know, and people die one by one in horrible ways. And this one guy gets trapped in the elevator and is plummeting down, and this big steel cable rips down and cuts the elevator in half and cuts the guy right in half. Pretty nasty. Another lady who is a news journalist tries to tell Richard about him as well, you know. And she ends up getting her eyes pecked off by the Crow, you know, and then she wanders off into the street and the Mack truck plows right into her. Oh, man. Some pretty brutal stuff and some great practical effects as well. Especially for back in 1978. But yeah, this film has a lot of the same tone, a lot of the same feel as the original, especially when you got that similar score with Jerry Goldsmith there. I just think it's an excellent sequel that more people need to talk about, you know. Another one who tries to suspect Damien after a while is Mark himself, his cousin. After he starts seeing that all these people are dying around him, and he always seems to be around when these people are dying, including one guy that gets, they're playing hockey and he falls under the ice, and even Richard himself is finally starting to question things like, the only one who vehemently defends Damien is Anne, Richard's wife. And, but yeah, Mark starts to question him, and he's trying to find out what's going on with this dude. Who is he, and then he finds out that he was born of the jackal. And then you even find out that Damien's cell structure is similar to the jackal. Because there's a chemical explosion that takes place in the Thorn Industries plant, and of course people died, had to go to the hospital, and Damien's not affected whatsoever. And that's how they find out, he's born of the jackal. Yeah, so even Mark has issues, and you know what happens then, Damien is quite fond of Mark, but, once they clash, bad things happen, and that's kind of the running theme through this film is, Damien knows who he is now, and, watch out world, you're in for big trouble. But yeah, fantastic film, once again, a top-notch cast with fantastic acting, amazing practical effects, some awesome kill scenes, great action. It's not quite as scary, per se, as the original, but it's just highly, highly entertaining. So I highly recommend Damien, Omen 2. Check it out. I give it 2 devil horns way up. Definitely check out Damien, Omen 2. Get it on DVD, Blu-ray, HD, whatever you gotta do. You have to get this film. You need it in your collection. Thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan, the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Good evening, folks, and we got some brand new merchandise for you over at www.thehorrorcona.com, and that's CONA.com. Representing the Horror Corner. Great new design. We got the Morbid Hour live stream there. You got the Horror Hangout live stream there. And you got my nemesis, the Dark Fate. So grab your t-shirt over at www.thehorrorcona.com. And we also got this beautiful new mug. Look at that. Very, very cool. Thought that came out really nice. So grab your merchandise today over at www.thehorrorcona.com. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Urshan gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.